Here are the 13 oldest and most disgusting American cars of the 1980s. Basic, unreliable, and built for those with no other options. You won't believe how bad some of these budget rides really were. The 1980s weren't all about sleek sports cars and futuristic designs. For those on a tight budget, the decade offered a range of cheap, poorly built cars that often left drivers frustrated and stranded. These vehicles were known for unreliable engines, bland designs, and low-quality materials, making them the last choice for anyone who could afford better. The Chevrolet Chevette, produced from 1976 to 1987, was Chevrolet's response to the oil crises and rising demand for small, fuel-efficient cars. Developed as a basic entry-level vehicle, the Chevette was intended to provide reliable, no-frills transportation at an affordable price. Unfortunately, despite its initial sales success, the Chevette is now remembered as a car that exemplified mediocrity and cut corners in nearly every way possible, leaving a trail of frustrated owners in its wake. The Chevette's design philosophy centered on simplicity and cost-cutting. Built on GM's T-body platform, it was marketed as a global car, sold in various configurations across different markets. In the US, it debuted with a boxy, utilitarian design that lacked any real aesthetic appeal. Its exterior was bland and uninspired, with small, round headlights, minimal chrome trim, and basic steel wheels. The hatchback design provided some practicality, but the car's overall look was more functional than fashionable. Competing models like the Volkswagen Rabbit or Ford Pinto offered more character, leaving the Chevette to languish as a purely practical option. Under the hood, the Chevette was powered by a range of small four-cylinder engines. The base engine was a 1.4-liter inline-four, followed by slightly more powerful 1.6-liter and 1.8-liter options. Output ranged from a meager 53 to 70 horsepower, making the car painfully slow. Acceleration was glacial, with 0 to 60 miles per hour taking well over 15 seconds in most versions. Even when equipped with a later 1.8-liter diesel engine, which was more fuel efficient, the Chevette's performance was abysmal. Drivers often found themselves struggling to keep up with traffic, and highway driving required careful planning and a lot of patience. The driving experience was further hampered by a crude suspension setup and a manual steering system that required significant effort at low speeds. The car's ride quality was rough and unrefined, with poor damping that made every bump and pothole felt inside the cabin. Handling was sloppy, characterized by significant body roll and imprecise steering. While the Chevette was light, weighing in at around 2,000 pounds, this didn't translate to agility or fun. The available automatic transmission sapped even more power from the already underwhelming engine, while the manual gearbox, though simple, was clunky and not particularly enjoyable to use. Inside, the Chevette was a masterclass in cost-cutting. The cabin featured hard plastic surfaces, thin vinyl seats, and minimal sound insulation. The dashboard was bare bones, offering little more than basic gauges and a few switches. Amenities like air conditioning, power windows, and decent audio systems were either optional or not available at all. The seats were uncomfortable on long trips, and rear passenger space was tight, even by compact car standards. The overall impression was one of austerity, with no effort made to disguise the car's budget nature. One of the Chevette's most notorious flaws was its susceptibility to rust. Owners in colder climates, where road salt was common, often found their cars developing rust in critical areas like the fenders, doors, and undercarriage within just a few years. GM's use of thin, poorly treated metal meant that rust prevention was nearly impossible without expensive aftermarket treatments. Many Chevettes met an early demise due to structural rust, leading to their eventual abandonment or scrapping. Reliability, another key factor in the car's appeal, was hit or miss. While the Chevette's mechanical simplicity made it relatively easy to work on, it also meant that components were often of low quality. Common issues included carburetor failures, weak clutches, electrical gremlins, and frequent fuel system problems. The electrical system was particularly problematic, with failing alternators, wiring issues, and unreliable starters. Owners often found themselves stranded or dealing with frequent, costly repairs. While parts were cheap and plentiful, the constant need for maintenance made ownership frustrating and expensive over time. Fuel economy was perhaps the Chevette's only redeeming quality. With small engines and lightweight construction, the car delivered respectable gas mileage, often achieving over 30 miles per gallon in mixed driving. However, this was little consolation to owners dealing with the car's numerous other shortcomings. The Ford Escort, introduced in 1981, was a significant model for Ford as it marked the company's transition to front-wheel drive in the compact segment, aiming to compete with imports like the Volkswagen Rabbit and Honda Civic. Despite its importance and initial success, especially in terms of sales, the Escort's reputation quickly soured due to a litany of problems that plagued early models. What was meant to be a modern, efficient, and practical car ended up as a symbol of disappointment for many buyers. The design of the Escort was conservative, featuring a boxy, utilitarian shape that prioritized function over form. While not unattractive, it lacked the character and flair of its European and Japanese rivals. The hatchback and wagon variants added practicality, but visually the Escort did little to stand out. By the mid-1980s, attempts to update the styling were made, but the car remained a plain, uninspiring sight on the road. Under the hood, early Escorts were powered by a range of engines that were, frankly, underwhelming. The base 1.6-liter four-cylinder engine produced a paltry 69 horsepower, leaving the car sluggish and barely capable of keeping up with traffic. Acceleration was lackluster, with 0 to 60 mph times exceeding 12 seconds. Even the later 1.9-liter engine, introduced to address performance complaints, failed to make the Escort feel lively. The optional diesel engine, while fuel-efficient, was painfully slow and noisy, making it suitable only for the most patient drivers. The Escort's handling was another sore point. While front-wheel drive should have provided predictable, stable performance, the car's suspension was poorly tuned, resulting in a rough, jarring ride over anything but the smoothest roads. The basic torsion beam rear suspension did little to absorb bumps, making the Escort feel unsettled and uncomfortable. Steering was vague and unresponsive, sapping any sense of driver engagement. Competitors like the Civic offered a far superior driving experience, with better handling and ride quality. One of the Escort's biggest flaws was its build quality. Cost-cutting measures were evident throughout the car, from the thin sheet metal that dented easily to the cheap, hard plastics used in the interior. The cabin felt flimsy, with poorly fitting panels, rattles, and squeaks developing early in the car's life. Seats were thinly padded and uncomfortable on long journeys. And interior space, while adequate for a compact car, was not particularly well utilized. Ergonomics were also an issue, with awkwardly placed controls and a generally uninspired dashboard design. Rust was a pervasive problem for the Escort, especially in regions with harsh winters and salted roads. Owners often found their cars developing rust in critical areas like the wheel arches, door sills, and undercarriage within just a few years. Ford's lack of effective rust-proofing meant that many Escorts succumbed to corrosion long before their mechanical components failed, leading to premature scrapping of countless vehicles. Reliability, another critical area for any economy car, was hit or miss with the Escort. While some owners reported relatively trouble-free experiences, others dealt with a host of issues, including failing transmissions, electrical gremlins, and persistent oil leaks. The carbureted engines in early models were particularly finicky, requiring frequent adjustments to run properly. The automatic transmissions were known for their rough shifting and premature failures, adding to the car's reputation for mechanical fragility. Fuel economy was one of the Escort's few redeeming qualities, especially in its later fuel-injected versions. However, this was little consolation to owners dealing with the car's numerous other shortcomings. Competitors offered similar efficiency with far fewer compromises in performance, comfort, and reliability. Despite its flaws, the Escort remained a sales success, largely due to aggressive pricing, financing deals, and Ford's strong dealer network. It also found favor with fleet buyers, who valued its low upfront cost and simplicity. However, for individual owners, the experience often fell short of expectations. One frustrated owner described their Escort as a car that teaches patience, mostly while waiting for the tow truck. Another lamented the car's frequent breakdowns and the ever-present battle against rust, joking that their Escort rusted in peace long before its time. In later years, Ford made efforts to improve the Escort, introducing better engines, fuel injection, and more refined suspension setups. However, by then, the damage to its reputation was done. The Escort's legacy is one of missed potential and a cautionary tale about the perils of prioritizing cost-cutting over quality. While it paved the way for future, more successful Ford compacts, the Escort of the 1980s remains a symbol of mediocrity in the annals of automotive history. The Dodge Omni and Plymouth Horizon, introduced in 1978, were Chrysler's attempt to compete in the rapidly growing compact car market, which was dominated by imports like the Volkswagen Golf and Honda Civic. With the promise of affordability, practicality, and fuel efficiency, these cars aimed to meet the needs of budget-conscious buyers. However, what Chrysler delivered fell far short of expectations, earning both models a reputation for being cheap, unreliable, and uninspiring. The Omni and Horizon were built on the same platform and shared many of the same mechanical components, making them essentially two versions of the same car. Both featured front-wheel drive layouts, which was a significant innovation for Chrysler at the time, as they were among the first American cars to adopt this configuration. While this helped with interior space and traction in wet conditions, it did little to redeem the overall driving experience. From a design perspective, the Omni and Horizon were both painfully uninspired. The boxy, generic styling was about as exciting as a cardboard box, with dull lines and a bland exterior that didn't stand out in any way. The design lacked the personality and charm of competitors from Europe and Japan, and the cars quickly became known for their utter lack of flair. If you saw one on the road, it was often easy to forget you had just seen it moments later. Under the hood, the Omni and Horizon offered a range of small engines, including a 1.7-liter four-cylinder and a 2.2-liter four-cylinder. While the 2.2-liter engine offered slightly better performance, none of the engines could be considered particularly powerful. Even the most powerful versions barely made over 80 horsepower, which was insufficient to give the cars any sense of speed or excitement. The performance was sluggish at best, with 0 to 60 miles per hour times often taking more than 12 seconds. The cars felt underpowered and slow, and overtaking other vehicles on the highway could be an exercise in frustration. The ride quality in both cars was harsh and uncomfortable. Despite their compact size, the suspension felt stiff and unsettled, giving passengers a bumpy, unpleasant experience over rough roads. Handling was another weak point, with vague steering and a lack of responsiveness. These were not cars that you would ever drive for fun. They were merely functional vehicles that got you from point A to point B without much in the way of enjoyment. Perhaps the most significant flaw of the Omni and Horizon was their abysmal reliability. Owners frequently reported issues with the engines, transmission, and electrical systems, often requiring expensive repairs and parts replacements well before the cars should have been considered worn out. Frequent breakdowns were not uncommon, and many owners found themselves at the mechanic far more often than they would have liked. The 2.2-liter engine, in particular, developed a reputation for eating up timing belts and developing head gasket failures, leading to costly repairs that overshadowed the car's otherwise modest purchase price. Transmission issues were also prevalent, with early models plagued by stubborn manual gearboxes that were difficult to shift smoothly. The interiors of the Omni and Horizon were basic at best. There were no frills, and the materials used in the cabin were cheap and easily worn out. The dashboard design was as uninspired as the exterior, with utilitarian controls and no attempt at offering anything remotely stylish. The seats were uncomfortable, with minimal cushioning, and the overall ergonomics left much to be desired. The cabins felt cramped, and while the cars were relatively small, the lack of quality interior materials made the space feel even more claustrophobic. Rust was another persistent issue. Like many cars of this era, the Omni and Horizon suffered from poor rust-proofing, leading to significant corrosion problems, especially in areas that saw harsh winters. Rust would often appear in critical spots like the wheel arches, underbody, and around the door sills. By the time the cars reached their 5th or 6th year, many owners found themselves dealing with more rust than car. Despite its shortcomings, the Omni and Horizon were successful in one respect. They were affordable and sold in large numbers. Chrysler marketed them as low-cost transportation for those who just needed a car to get by, and in that sense, they succeeded. However, the cost-cutting measures that made them cheap to buy also made them unpleasant to own. The cars were prone to frequent repairs, uncomfortable to drive, and lacking in any real driving enjoyment. In terms of safety, the Omni and Horizon didn't offer much either. Crash tests were not as widely conducted back then as they are now, but the cars were not known for their strong safety ratings. Basic features like airbags and anti-lock brakes were unheard of. And while they had seat belts, the AMC Spirit, produced from 1979 to 1983, was a subcompact hatchback that aimed to offer affordable transportation for budget-conscious consumers. However, despite its compact size and low price, the Spirit failed to deliver much in terms of quality, performance, or overall appeal. By the time it hit the market, it was already outdated, and it became an example of the shortcomings of AMC during its final years. When it came to performance, the Spirit was far from inspiring. The base models came with small, underpowered engines, typically a 1.6-liter four-cylinder, which provided just enough power to move the car, but not much more. Even the available 2.0-liter engine struggled to deliver satisfying acceleration, with the car feeling sluggish in almost every driving scenario. It wasn't uncommon for owners to find that getting the Spirit up to highway speeds required some serious effort, and overtaking other vehicles was an exercise in patience. There was also the issue of poor handling, with the Spirit's suspension offering little in terms of smoothness or composure. The car's ride quality was harsh and its handling was uninspiring. It felt like a car that was built for one purpose: to get from point A to point B without any regard for driving enjoyment or comfort. In terms of interior space, the Spirit didn't fare much better. While technically a hatchback, the cramped cabin made it feel smaller than it was, with limited legroom and a design that was functional at best. The seats were uncomfortable, and the interior materials felt cheap and plasticky, making the cabin feel even more basic. The dashboard design was also outdated, with clunky dials and switches that lacked any form of sophistication or user-friendly layout. The rear seats, when they could be used at all, were cramped and not particularly suitable for adults, leaving the Spirit as a better option for short commutes or occasional drives rather than long road trips. Rust was a common issue with the Spirit, as the car's build quality was questionable at best. Like many of AMC's vehicles from this era, the Spirit was prone to corrosion, especially around the wheel wells, doors, and undercarriage. Over time, it wasn't unusual for the car to develop noticeable rust spots, which not only affected the car's aesthetics, but also its structural integrity. The car's cheap construction and low-quality materials contributed to its susceptibility to wear and tear, and many owners found themselves dealing with constant repairs. The Spirit's safety features were also lacking by modern standards. It was equipped with basic seat belts, but options like airbags and anti-lock brakes were unheard of in this subcompact segment. While it wasn't considered particularly unsafe for the time, its lack of modern safety features, combined with its poor handling, made it far from reassuring in the event of an accident. In terms of design, the AMC Spirit was another example of a car that looked like it was trying too hard to be modern, but ended up feeling outdated and uninspired. The exterior had a boxy, angular shape that was typical of many cars from the 1970s and 1980s, but it lacked the visual appeal or personality of its competitors. There was nothing particularly striking about its appearance, and it didn't stand out in a crowded marketplace of subcompacts. The design felt like a leftover from an earlier era, one that AMC was struggling to leave behind as it neared the end of its existence. On top of all its performance and build quality issues, the Spirit also had a reputation for being less reliable than its rivals. As a result, many owners found themselves dealing with frequent mechanical problems, whether it was engine troubles, transmission issues, or electrical failures. The car was not particularly well regarded for its longevity, and many Spirit owners found themselves needing to replace components sooner than they expected. While its low price point initially attracted buyers, the ongoing repairs and lack of durability made it a less attractive option in the long run. The Spirit's appeal was primarily based on its affordability, but even then, its competitors offered more for the money. Cars like the Honda Civic and Toyota Corolla provided more reliable, fuel-efficient options with better build quality and performance. The Spirit may have been cheap, but it quickly became apparent that the low cost came at the expense of almost everything else. In hindsight, the AMC Spirit stands as a symbol of a company in decline, scrambling to stay relevant in an automotive world that was rapidly evolving. Though it served its purpose as a low-cost, no-frills vehicle, it ultimately failed to offer the performance, reliability, or overall driving experience that buyers wanted. Today, the Spirit is largely forgotten, and with good reason. It was a car that was already outdated by the time it was released. The Pontiac 1000, produced from 1981 to 1987, was a subcompact car that epitomized the dangers of badge engineering in the automotive world. Essentially a rebadged Chevrolet Chevette, the 1000 was a weak attempt by Pontiac to capture the growing demand for affordable, fuel-efficient vehicles in the early 1980s. However, rather than offering an improved version of the Chevette, the 1000 inherited all of the issues that made its predecessor a disappointment, leaving a legacy of underperformance, poor quality, and limited appeal. One of the primary issues with the Pontiac 1000 was its lackluster performance. The car was powered by a tiny, underwhelming engine that struggled to deliver adequate power for daily driving. With sluggish acceleration and a lack of punch on the highway, the 1000's performance was far from engaging. Unlike other cars in the same class, which offered a modicum of excitement or at least respectable handling, the 1000 was simply slow and unrefined. Its lack of agility and inability to provide a smooth driving experience made it a frustrating option for anyone looking for a compact car with any sense of enthusiasm. When compared to competitors from brands like Ford, Honda, and Toyota, which were offering more powerful engines and better performance, the 1000 felt like an outdated relic before it even hit the market. The underwhelming performance was matched by the 1000's overall poor reliability. Just as the Chevette had gained a reputation for being prone to mechanical failures, the Pontiac 1000 was no better. Engine issues were a common complaint, with many owners experiencing trouble with their powertrains as early as a few years into ownership. The car's small engine, while relatively fuel-efficient, was plagued with problems that led to constant visits to the mechanic. Transmission issues also plagued the model, with owners reporting a rough and unreliable shifting experience. Many drivers experienced frequent breakdowns, and even basic components like the ignition system and electrical components were prone to failure, further tarnishing the 1000's reputation for dependability. As time went on, it became clear that the 1000 was a car that needed constant maintenance to stay on the road, which made it less of a practical choice for anyone in need of a reliable vehicle. Build quality was another significant flaw of the Pontiac 1000. As was common with many budget cars of the era, the materials used in the 1000's construction felt cheap and flimsy. The interior was basic at best, with hard plastic surfaces that lacked durability. The seats were uncomfortable and poorly padded, making long drives a test of endurance rather than enjoyment. The dashboard design was Spartan, with few features or refinements to make the driving experience more pleasant. Additionally, the build quality was such that owners often found themselves dealing with rust issues even in relatively young cars. The body, especially in areas prone to moisture, began to deteriorate quickly, making the 1000 a poor investment in the long run. While other vehicles in the same price range might have had better fit and finish, the 1000 felt like it was thrown together without much thought for longevity or driver satisfaction. Perhaps the most disappointing aspect of the Pontiac 1000 was its badge engineering. Instead of offering anything truly new or innovative, Pontiac simply rebadged the Chevrolet Chevette, a car already known for being a poor performer and unreliable. This decision to rebrand a lackluster car rather than improving upon it with better design or engineering felt like a missed opportunity for Pontiac. In fact, the 1000 had a few distinguishing characteristics from the Chevette beyond its Pontiac badge, and it failed to offer any real advantages in terms of performance, reliability, or features. While other automakers were innovating and making strides to enhance the appeal of their compact cars, Pontiac seemed content with simply slapping a new nameplate on an old car and hoping for the best. This lack of effort left many consumers unimpressed and turned off by the thousands' uninspired approach. The lack of ambition behind the Pontiac Thousands design and engineering meant it never had a chance to stand out in a competitive market. It was neither as fun to drive as sportier compact cars nor as practical as the more reliable offerings from other manufacturers. Even its price, which initially seemed appealing, became a disadvantage as the car's performance issues and low resale value made it a poor investment over time. The Thousand did not offer any of the qualities that Pontiac enthusiasts had come to expect from the brand, nor did it possess the modern features and capabilities that consumers were looking for in an affordable, everyday car. The Chevrolet Citation, produced from 1980 to 1985, was General Motors' first attempt at a front-wheel drive compact car. Launched with much fanfare, the Citation was intended to compete in the growing market for small, fuel-efficient cars during the late 1970s and early 1980s. However, despite initial popularity, the Citation quickly earned a reputation for being a poorly built, unreliable, and problematic car, far from the revolution GM had hoped for. At its core, the Citation was marketed as a compact car that would offer better fuel efficiency and more interior space than traditional rear-wheel drive compacts like the Chevy Chevette. Its front-wheel drive layout was a step toward modernity, and its spacious interior was a selling point for families looking for an affordable, everyday car. However, the Citation's early promise was quickly overshadowed by a series of significant flaws that plagued its reputation. One of the biggest problems with the Citation was its poor build quality. Despite being GM's flagship compact, it was widely criticized for its lack of durability and fit and finish. Many owners reported that the car's panels didn't align properly, and the interior materials felt cheap and flimsy. It wasn't uncommon for the car's trim to fall apart or its plastics to crack after just a few years of use. In addition, the Citation suffered from notorious rust problems, particularly in the undercarriage and wheel wells. The combination of poor materials and subpar construction meant that the Citation was often on the receiving end of repair bills before it even reached its first 100,000 miles, and it quickly earned a reputation for being unreliable. The Citation's mechanical issues were another serious problem. The car was subject to numerous recalls during its production run, with problems ranging from faulty fuel systems to issues with the suspension. These recalls contributed significantly to the Citation's quickly tarnished reputation, as many owners found themselves having to take their cars in for repairs far more often than they would have liked. Even when not under recall, the Citation was plagued by issues like engine failure, electrical problems, and transmission issues, further solidifying its reputation as a vehicle that simply couldn't be trusted. On the road, the Citation's performance left much to be desired. While the car was not intended to be a performance vehicle, its lack of driving dynamics and lackluster acceleration made it a dull ride for many owners. The car's handling was uninspiring, and many reported that it had a tendency to understeer, making it less fun to drive than its competitors. The engine options available were not particularly powerful, and while they were adequate for city driving, the Citation was a poor performer when it came to highway acceleration. The overall driving experience was a major letdown for consumers, especially compared to other cars in the compact market, such as the Honda Civic or Toyota Corolla, which offered a better balance of efficiency, comfort, and performance. Despite its initial success in the marketplace, the Citation's reputation quickly soured due to these persistent issues. Early models may have seemed like an affordable and efficient alternative to larger, rear-wheel drive vehicles, but they were undermined by poor execution and a lack of reliability. GM's attempt to innovate with front-wheel drive and a compact footprint was undercut by these mechanical and quality concerns. The Citation's initial popularity evaporated as the market realized that the car was far more trouble than it was worth, and it became one of the most infamous models in GM's history for its poor reliability and substandard quality. To make matters worse, the Citation's resale value plummeted as the years went on. Owners found it difficult to get any kind of decent trade-in value for their cars, and the car was quickly relegated to the ranks of used cars with bad reputations. Its rust issues, combined with the constant need for repairs, meant that the Citation was often a money pit for those unfortunate enough to own one. In the end, the Chevrolet Citation was a clear case of too little, too late. While it might have had the potential to be a successful small car, its mechanical failures, poor build quality, and lackluster performance meant that it failed to live up to the expectations of both buyers and critics. Instead of marking GM's success in the small car market, it became a symbol of their missteps during the early 1980s and a reminder of the risks of rushing a car into production without paying adequate attention to quality control and design. Though it may have had good intentions, the Citation's numerous flaws and subsequent decline are a cautionary tale of how even well-intentioned cars can go terribly wrong. The Ford EXP, which was produced from 1982 to 1988, was a two-seat coupe that attempted to tap into the sporty compact car market, a segment that was growing in popularity during the early 1980s. Built on the same platform as the Ford Escort, the EXP was part of Ford's attempt to broaden its lineup by offering something that combined the allure of a sporty, fuel-efficient car with the practicality of a compact. The EXP's sleek, wedge-shaped design hinted at a car that could deliver both style and performance, but unfortunately, it fell far short of those promises. One of the most glaring issues with the EXP was its performance, or rather, the complete lack of it. Despite being marketed as a sporty coupe, the EXP's engine options were severely underwhelming. The initial models were equipped with a 1.6-liter, four-cylinder engine that churned out just 70 to 80 horsepower. This put the EXP firmly in the slow and steady camp, rather than the sporty and exciting one. The car's acceleration was sluggish, and it could barely manage to get out of its own way. In a market where competitors like the Honda CRX and Toyota Celica offered more power and better handling, the EXP simply couldn't compete. With its lack of performance, the EXP failed to live up to its youthful, energetic image. What was meant to be a zippy and engaging little coupe instead felt more like a commuter car on steroids, slow, heavy, and uninspired. Adding to the problem was the EXP's lack of driving excitement. The suspension setup was soft and unsporting, making the car feel disconnected and vague on the road. Unlike other compact cars of the time, such as the Mazda MX-5 Miata, which offered sharp handling and a tactile driving experience, the EXP lacked agility. The steering was imprecise, the body roll was significant, and the car felt more like a basic grocery getter than something designed for drivers seeking fun behind the wheel. In fact, the handling was so lackluster that many owners simply found it difficult to enjoy even basic driving tasks like cornering or merging onto highways. The design of the Ford EXP didn't do much to bolster its image either. While it did feature some sleek, angular lines, the overall look was awkward and unbalanced. The front end had a chunky, square appearance that contrasted sharply with the car's more flowing side profile. The rear end, in particular, was often criticized for looking oddly truncated, giving the car a somewhat unfinished and haphazard look. Its wedge shape, which was meant to evoke sportiness, instead came across as utilitarian and uninspiring. The EXP didn't have the flair or visual drama of its rivals. It looked more like a budget-conscious attempt at a futuristic coupe, rather than a vehicle designed to excite or evoke any kind of passion. Inside, the EXP's cabin was just as disappointing. The two-seat layout didn't provide much in the way of comfort, and the materials used throughout the interior were cheap and unrefined. Hard plastics, unappealing fabrics, and low-quality trim pieces gave the interior a budget feel, something that was at odds with the car's supposed sporty intent. While the cabin wasn't cramped to the point of discomfort, it didn't feel special, and it certainly didn't create any kind of emotional connection with the driver. Many of the controls were awkwardly placed, which made them difficult to use, and the general atmosphere inside the car was sterile, lacking any sense of excitement or joy. The Ford EXP's build quality was another source of frustration for owners. Despite being a product of the early 1980s, when automotive quality was improving across the industry, the EXP was known for being prone to rust, especially in the wheel wells and lower body panels. Additionally, the car's engine and transmission systems were prone to issues that could leave owners with costly repair bills. While the EXP did offer decent fuel economy for the time, it couldn't make up for its other shortcomings, especially when compared to competitors that delivered both performance and efficiency in a more balanced package. Though the EXP was marketed as a fun and sporty car, it simply didn't deliver in any meaningful way. What Ford had hoped would be a zippy, fun-to-drive coupe became, instead, a slow and underwhelming vehicle with a design that failed to captivate and performance that was nowhere near as thrilling as the advertising suggested. In a market where cars like the Honda CRX, Toyota Celica, and even the Nissan 200SX offered better value, better handling, and more engaging driving experiences, the Ford EXP struggled to find a place. Even by the standards of the early 1980s, it was a car that was simply too slow, too awkward, and too poorly executed to stand out. In the end, the EXP's lack of performance, questionable build quality, uninspiring design, and lackluster driving experience made it one of the more forgettable entries in Ford's history. The Dodge Aries and Plymouth Reliant, produced from 1981 to 1989, were part of Chrysler's famous K-Car platform, a line of compact front-wheel drive vehicles that are often credited with saving the company from financial collapse. These cars were designed to be affordable, fuel-efficient, and versatile, aiming to appeal to budget-conscious buyers during the early 1980s economic downturn. While they succeeded in stabilizing Chrysler's fortunes, they were far from desirable vehicles in terms of design, comfort, and overall quality. One of the most immediate criticisms of the Dodge Aries and Plymouth Reliant was their styling, or rather, the complete lack of it. Both cars were unapologetically boxy, with straight lines and flat surfaces dominating their design. The styling was utilitarian at best, with a focus on function over form. While this simplicity may have helped keep costs down, it left the cars looking uninspired and dull, especially compared to sleeker imports like the Honda Accord or Toyota Camry. The K-cars lacked any sense of flair or excitement, appearing as if they were designed purely with a ruler and no artistic input. Even by the standards of the early 1980s, when boxy designs were in vogue, the Aries and Reliant were among the blandest offerings on the market. Interior quality was another area where the K-cars fell short. The cabins were filled with cheap plastics, low-grade fabrics, and a general feeling of austerity. The seats were flat and unsupportive, offering little in the way of comfort, especially on long trips. Controls and switches felt flimsy and were often awkwardly placed, making them difficult to use. The dashboard layout was uninspired, with minimal effort put into aesthetics or driver engagement. Noise insulation was minimal, meaning that occupants were frequently subjected to the sounds of the engine, road, and wind. All of this contributed to an interior experience that felt more like a budget rental car than a vehicle designed to entice private buyers. Performance was similarly underwhelming. Most Dodge Aries and Plymouth Reliant models were equipped with small, four-cylinder engines that prioritized fuel economy over power. While this was understandable given the economic climate of the early 1980s, it made for a driving experience that was, at best, adequate and, at worst, painfully sluggish. Acceleration was slow, and the engines often felt strained, especially when the car was loaded with passengers or cargo. Handling was soft and imprecise, with significant body roll in corners and a vague, disconnected feel from the road. The suspension was tuned for comfort rather than sportiness, but even then, it struggled to absorb bumps and potholes effectively, leading to a ride that was often more jarring than comfortable. Reliability and build quality were also significant issues. While the K-cars were initially praised for their practicality and affordability, they quickly developed a reputation for being prone to rust, particularly in areas with harsh winters and road salt. Mechanical failures were common, with issues ranging from transmission problems to electrical gremlins. Owners often found themselves making frequent trips to the repair shop, which negated much of the cost savings they had hoped to achieve by purchasing an inexpensive car. Rust was especially problematic, with many K-cars succumbing to corrosion long before their mechanical components gave out. Despite these flaws, the Dodge Aries and Plymouth Reliant did have some redeeming qualities. Their front-wheel drive layout made them relatively capable in poor weather conditions, and their boxy design allowed for a surprisingly spacious interior and trunk. They were also incredibly versatile, available in a variety of body styles, including sedans, wagons, and even convertibles. This versatility, combined with their low price and decent fuel economy, helped make them popular with families, budget-conscious buyers, and fleet operators. However, these practical advantages were not enough to overcome the car's numerous shortcomings. The Aries and Reliant were, at their core, cheaply built economy cars that prioritized cost-cutting over quality. While they served their purpose in saving Chrysler from financial ruin, they left much to be desired in terms of driving enjoyment, comfort, and long-term reliability. For many owners, the experience of driving and maintaining a K car was more of a chore than a pleasure. In the end, the Dodge Aries and Plymouth Reliant occupy an important place in automotive history as the cars that helped rescue Chrysler during a difficult period. However, their legacy is also a reminder of the compromises that were made to achieve that goal. While they were practical and affordable, they were also bland, uncomfortable, and prone to problems, qualities that ensured they were quickly forgotten once better options became available. The Buick Skyhawk, 1982 to 1989, is often remembered as one of General Motors' many attempts to carve out a niche in the burgeoning compact car market of the 1980s. Built on the J-body platform alongside the Chevrolet Cavalier, Pontiac Sunbird, Oldsmobile Forenza, and Cadillac Cimarron, the Skyhawk was supposed to blend Buick's premium reputation with the efficiency and affordability demanded by younger buyers. Unfortunately, it ended up offering neither premium quality nor an engaging driving experience, instead becoming a symbol of GM's struggles during that era. At launch, the Skyhawk's sleek aerodynamic design helped it stand out from the boxier, more conservative cars of the time. Buick offered it in a variety of body styles, including a coupe, hatchback, sedan, and even a wagon. The promise of a nimble, fun-to-drive car was reinforced by the inclusion of some sportier trim levels like the Skyhawk T-Type, which featured distinctive styling cues and a turbocharged engine option. Despite its sporty aspirations, the Skyhawk fell flat when it came to performance. Most models were equipped with small, underpowered engines. The base engine was a 1.8-liter four-cylinder, producing a paltry 84 horsepower. Later models upgraded to a 2.0-liter engine, but even this struggled to deliver adequate acceleration. The turbocharged version, introduced in 1984, offered more power, around 150 horsepower, but it came with significant drawbacks. Turbo lag was pronounced, making acceleration uneven and frustrating. Additionally, the turbo models were notorious for overheating and mechanical issues, often leaving owners stranded. The lack of performance was further exacerbated by the Skyhawk's transmissions, which included a clunky 3-speed automatic and a notchy, imprecise manual. Both options dulled any sense of engagement behind the wheel, making the car feel more like an appliance than a fun, sporty vehicle. The Skyhawk's suspension setup prioritized comfort over handling, but it failed to excel at either. The soft suspension led to excessive body roll in corners, while the car's nose-heavy design, especially in models with larger engines, made it prone to understeer. The steering was vague and lacked feedback, making it difficult for drivers to feel confident at higher speeds or on twisty roads. Competing cars, particularly from Japan, such as the Honda Civic and Toyota Corolla, offered far superior handling and ride quality, leaving the Skyhawk feeling archaic in comparison. Inside, the Skyhawk was a letdown. While Buick marketed the car as a premium compact, the interior materials were anything but luxurious. Hard, brittle plastics dominated the cabin, and fit and finish issues were common. Many owners reported rattles and squeaks developing early in the car's life, a testament to the poor build quality. The seats were thinly padded and lacked support, making long trips uncomfortable. Even the dashboard design, which Buick tried to modernize with digital displays in later models, felt dated and uninspired. One of the Skyhawk's most innovative features, the optional electronic control center, a digital instrument cluster, quickly became a liability. The technology was prone to glitches and failures, leaving drivers without crucial information like speed and fuel levels. Repairing these systems was expensive and often required specialized parts that became hard to find as the car aged. Mechanically, the Skyhawk was plagued by reliability problems. The engines, especially the turbocharged versions, were known for oil leaks, overheating, and head gasket failures. The electrical system was another weak point, with frequent issues affecting everything from the starter motor to the lighting. Transmission problems were also common, particularly with the automatic models, which often suffered from slipping and premature failure. Perhaps most notorious was the Skyhawk's susceptibility to rust. The car's body panels were thin and poorly treated, leading to rapid corrosion, especially in regions where road salt was used during winter. Many Skyhawks rusted out before they reached 100,000 miles, contributing to the car's poor resale value and early demise for many examples. Buick struggled to justify the Skyhawk's place in its lineup. Positioned as a premium compact, it was priced higher than many of its competitors, but offered little in the way of additional value. Buyers looking for affordable, reliable transportation were better served by Japanese imports, while those seeking performance gravitated toward domestic models like the Ford Mustang or Chevrolet Camaro. By the time the Skyhawk was discontinued in 1989, it had already become an afterthought in the compact car segment. Buick's attempt to court younger, more budget-conscious buyers failed, and the brand would pivot back to its traditional focus on larger, more luxurious sedans. The Chevrolet Cavalier, 1982 to 1994, was General Motors' answer to the increasing popularity of fuel-efficient, reliable compact cars from Japanese automakers like Toyota and Honda. Built on GM's J-body platform, it was meant to be an affordable, mass-market vehicle that could compete head-to-head with imports. Available in a variety of body styles, including a sedan, coupe, wagon, and convertible, the Cavalier was versatile on paper. However, the reality was far less impressive, and the car quickly became synonymous with mediocrity, plagued by poor build quality, uninspired design, and frequent mechanical issues. At its debut in 1982, the Cavalier's styling was bland but inoffensive, designed to appeal to the broadest audience possible. It featured simple, angular lines that looked dated almost immediately, especially when compared to the sleeker, more aerodynamic designs emerging from Japan. The interior was equally uninspired, dominated by hard plastics, basic controls, and a general lack of attention to detail. While GM touted the Cavalier's affordability, it was clear that corners had been cut everywhere to keep costs low. Under the hood, early models were powered by a lethargic 1.8-liter four-cylinder engine producing just 88 horsepower. This engine struggled to move the Cavalier's modest weight, resulting in sluggish acceleration and poor overall performance. A slightly more powerful 2.0-liter engine was introduced later, but it did little to improve the car's reputation. Fuel economy was decent, but not enough to offset the Cavalier's lack of refinement. The transmissions, both manual and automatic, were clunky and prone to failure, adding to the frustration of ownership. The Cavalier's handling and ride quality were also subpar. The suspension was tuned for comfort, but delivered neither a smooth ride nor engaging dynamics. The car felt floaty at highway speeds and was easily unsettled by rough roads. Steering was vague and unresponsive, making the car feel disconnected from the driver. Competing models like the Honda Civic and Mazda 323 were far superior in terms of both handling and ride comfort, leaving the Cavalier feeling outdated and uninspired. Reliability was one of the Cavalier's most significant issues, especially in its early years. Owners frequently reported problems with the engine, transmission, and electrical systems. The car was prone to oil leaks, overheating, and head gasket failures. Rust was another persistent problem, particularly in northern climates where road salt was used. The thin, poorly treated metal body panels corroded quickly, often leading to significant structural issues within just a few years. Interior quality was another sore spot for the Cavalier. The seats were thinly padded and uncomfortable, especially on long trips. The dashboard and controls felt cheap, and build quality was inconsistent, with poorly fitting panels and frequent rattles. While later models attempted to address some of these issues with slight interior updates, The changes were largely cosmetic and did little to improve the overall experience. Despite its flaws, the Cavalier sold well, primarily due to its low price and widespread availability. It became a staple of rental car fleets and was a popular choice for budget-conscious buyers who valued affordability over quality. GM aggressively marketed the Cavalier as a practical, no-frills transportation solution, and for many buyers, it served that purpose adequately. However, it never achieved the level of refinement or reliability that buyers had come to expect from its Japanese competitors. Throughout its production run, the Cavalier underwent several facelifts and updates, but these changes were mostly superficial. The car remained fundamentally the same, with its underlying issues largely unaddressed. By the time the first-generation Cavalier was replaced in 1995, its reputation had been firmly cemented as a cheap, disposable car that was best avoided if quality and longevity were priorities. In retrospect, the Chevrolet Cavalier is a prime example of GM's struggles during the 1980s and early 1990s. The company's focus on cost-cutting and mass production came at the expense of quality and innovation. While the Cavalier was successful from a sales perspective, it failed to deliver the kind of driving experience and reliability that buyers were increasingly demanding. Today, it's remembered more for its shortcomings than its successes, serving as a cautionary tale of what happens when automakers prioritize price over quality. The Mercury Lynx 1981 to 1987 was Mercury's attempt to enter the growing compact car market, a time when American automakers were desperately trying to counter the rising popularity of reliable, efficient imports. As a badge-engineered twin of the Ford Escort, the Lynx was meant to be a slightly more refined alternative, offering practicality and fuel efficiency at an affordable price. However, it failed to stand out and became notorious for its underwhelming performance, questionable build quality, and a lack of any real innovation. At its heart, the Lynx was built on the same platform as the Escort, sharing nearly all its components except for some superficial styling changes. The front-wheel drive layout and basic suspension system were adequate for the time but uninspiring. Power came from a 1.6-liter four-cylinder engine, producing a meager 69 horsepower in early models. This engine struggled to move the car with any sense of urgency, leading to sluggish acceleration and a driving experience best described as frustrating. Even when a more powerful 1.9-liter engine was introduced, offering up to 86 horsepower, the Lynx remained painfully slow compared to its Japanese rivals. Transmission choices included a 3-speed automatic and a 5-speed manual, neither of which did much to improve performance. The manual gearbox in particular was often criticized for its vague and clunky shifts. Handling was another weak point. The Lynx's suspension, designed for comfort rather than agility, resulted in excessive body roll during cornering and a disconnected feeling on the road. The steering was vague and unresponsive, making the car feel less stable at higher speeds. Competitors like the Honda Civic and Volkswagen Golf, which were nimble and enjoyable to drive, easily outclassed the Lynx in this area. This lack of driving engagement made the car feel outdated even when it was new. Inside, the Lynx offered little to get excited about. The cabin was dominated by hard plastics and cheap materials, creating a utilitarian atmosphere that lacked any sense of refinement. Seats were thinly padded and offered minimal support, making long drives uncomfortable. Controls were basic and often felt flimsy, with many owners reporting issues with broken knobs and switches. The dashboard design was bland and uninspired, reflecting the car's overall focus on cost-cutting rather than comfort or style. While optional features like air conditioning and power windows were available, they added significantly to the cost, undermining the Lynx's appeal as a budget-friendly vehicle. Perhaps the most infamous issue with the Lynx was its tendency to rust. The car's thin metal panels and inadequate rust-proofing meant that corrosion would set in quickly, especially in regions with harsh winters. Many Lynx owners found themselves dealing with rust after only a few years, affecting both the car's appearance and structural integrity. This problem, combined with mechanical reliability issues, significantly reduced the car's lifespan. Electrical problems were also common, with faulty wiring leading to issues with lights, gauges, and other essential components. The engine, though simple in design, required frequent maintenance, and even then, it often struggled to perform reliably. Despite its shortcomings, the Lynx managed to find a modest following among buyers who prioritize affordability and fuel economy over performance and quality. It was marketed as a practical, no-frills vehicle that could get the job done, even if it lacked excitement. However, as more reliable and better-equipped imports flooded the market, the Lynx's flaws became impossible to ignore. Sales declined steadily, and by the time production ended in 1987, the car was already a forgotten relic in a rapidly evolving automotive landscape. Today, the Mercury Lynx is remembered, if at all, as a symbol of the struggles faced by American automakers in the 1980s. It serves as a reminder of an era when cost-cutting and badge engineering were seen as solutions to rising competition, but ultimately failed to deliver cars that could match the quality and innovation of their rivals. For enthusiasts and collectors, the Lynx holds little appeal, overshadowed by more memorable and successful vehicles from the same period. Its legacy, if it has one, is a cautionary tale about the dangers of mediocrity in a market that demands excellence. The Oldsmobile Forenza, 1982 to 1988, was Oldsmobile's attempt to enter the growing compact car market with a model built on GM's widely used J-body platform. The idea was to provide a domestic alternative to increasingly popular imports like the Honda Civic, Toyota Corolla, and Volkswagen Golf. Unfortunately, while the Forenza offered multiple body styles and Oldsmobile branding, it fell short in nearly every meaningful way, saddled with outdated technology, poor build quality, and a lack of driving excitement. Ultimately, it became a symbol of General Motors' struggle to adapt to changing market demands in the 1980s. The Forenza was introduced at a time when Oldsmobile was attempting to shed its image as a brand for older, conservative buyers. With the J-body platform, GM sought to create a lineup of compact cars that could be shared across its various divisions, including Chevrolet, Pontiac, Buick, and Cadillac. Each brand was tasked with giving its version a unique identity, but in practice, the differences were largely cosmetic. Oldsmobile attempted to give the Forenza a more upscale feel compared to its J-body siblings, such as the Chevrolet Cavalier and Pontiac Sunbird. The exterior featured sharper, boxy lines typical of the era, but it lacked any distinctive styling cues that could set it apart. A variety of body styles were available, including a two-door coupe, four-door sedan, station wagon, and a three-door hatchback. Despite these options, the design felt generic and uninspired, failing to capture any sense of innovation or excitement. Under the hood, the Forenza came equipped with a range of uninspiring engines. The base models featured a 1.8-liter inline-four that produced a meager 84 horsepower. Later, a 2.0-liter version was introduced, bumping output to around 90 to 110 horsepower, depending on the model year. These engines were paired with either a 3-speed automatic or a 5-speed manual transmission. The lack of power was immediately noticeable, especially when compared to more agile and refined imports. Acceleration was sluggish, with 0 to 60 miles per hour times exceeding 12 seconds in most configurations. Even when Oldsmobile added a 2.8-liter V6 option in later years, the performance remained underwhelming. The V6 engine, which produced around 125 horsepower, was more powerful but not enough to overcome the Forenza's weight and lack of refinement. One of the most significant issues with the Forenza's performance was its handling. The suspension, tuned more for comfort than sportiness, felt overly soft and disconnected. Body roll was pronounced in corners, and the steering was vague, providing little feedback to the driver. This made the Forenza feel unstable and unresponsive, especially on winding roads. Braking was also subpar, with front disc and rear drum brakes that lacked the stopping power needed for confident driving. Inside, the Forenza was a lesson in cost-cutting. The cabin materials were cheap and poorly assembled, dominated by hard plastics and flimsy trim pieces. The seats were thinly padded and offered little support, making long drives uncomfortable. The dashboard was cluttered with a mishmash of buttons and switches that felt like afterthoughts, and many of these controls were prone to breaking or malfunctioning. Noise insulation was practically non-existent, allowing engine noise, road noise, and wind to intrude into the cabin. This lack of refinement was a constant reminder of the car's budget-conscious design. Optional features like air conditioning, power windows, and upgraded audio systems were available, but adding them significantly increased the price, negating the Firenze's affordability. Perhaps the most damning aspect of the Firenze was its reliability, or lack thereof. The car was plagued by a host of mechanical issues, including engine failures, transmission problems, and electrical gremlins. Owners often reported stalling, difficulty starting, and overheating, especially in models equipped with the V6 engine. Rust was another significant problem, with body panels and undercarriages deteriorating rapidly, particularly in regions with harsh winters and road salt. GM issued numerous recalls for the Firenze during its production run, covering everything from faulty fuel systems to defective brakes. These recalls, combined with the car's poor reputation for quality, severely damaged consumer confidence. By the mid-1980s, the Firenze was struggling to attract buyers, and even aggressive discounting couldn't save it from declining sales. When the Firenze first hit the market, it enjoyed a brief period of moderate success, thanks in part to GM's marketing efforts and Oldsmobile's loyal customer base. However, it quickly became apparent that the Firenze was not up to the task of competing with imports. Its combination of lackluster performance, poor build quality, and reliability issues made it and also ran in a segment that was becoming increasingly competitive. The Plymouth Turismo, 1983 to 1987, was a sporty-looking hatchback produced by Chrysler, and it quickly became a symbol of the company's struggle to deliver on performance and quality in the 1980s. While the Turismo's styling suggested a fun, zippy car, its lackluster engineering and poor build quality ensured that it fell short of the mark. It was essentially a rebranded version of the Dodge Charger and shared the same platform. But this didn't translate into the driving experience one might expect from such a design. Despite offering sporty looks, the Turismo's driving dynamics, powertrain, and reliability were all major letdowns for owners. At the heart of the Plymouth Turismo's shortcomings was its underpowered engine. The base model came with a 1.7-liter, four-cylinder engine that produced a meager 84 horsepower. This engine made the Turismo feel sluggish at best, as it struggled to reach 60 miles per hour in a timely manner. For a car marketed as sporty, that was a glaring weakness, though later models offered a slightly larger 2.2-liter engine. Producing up to 99 horsepower, it still didn't come close to meeting the expectations of buyers who were hoping for some serious acceleration or responsiveness. The Turismo's acceleration was lackluster at best, and it struggled to keep pace with rivals in the same class. The performance was downright disappointing when compared to other hot hatches of the time, such as the Volkswagen Golf GTI or the Ford Escort GT. Beyond the engine, the Turismo's ride and handling also left much to be desired. Despite the fact that Chrysler marketed it as a sporty vehicle, it was anything but. The suspension was soft and unsophisticated, which led to a bouncy, unstable ride on anything other than the smoothest of roads. When it came to cornering, the Turismo was prone to excessive body roll, making it feel less like a nimble hatchback and more like a boat on water. The steering was vague, making it difficult to place the car with precision in tight corners, and the brakes were prone to fading under hard use. In short, the Plymouth Turismo was not the lively, agile car its looks promised. Rather, it was a car that felt sluggish and unrefined, failing to inspire confidence behind the wheel. Inside, the Turismo's interior was nothing to write home about. While the exterior featured the appearance of a sporty, youthful car, the cabin was bland, cheap, and uninspired. The dashboard, door panels, and seats were all made from low-grade plastic that felt brittle and prone to cracking. The seats themselves offered minimal support and were uncomfortable for long drives. The driving position was awkward, with the layout of the controls feeling cramped and poorly thought out. Despite Chrysler's attempts to make the Turismo feel futuristic, the interior was a letdown and didn't reflect the car's intended youthful appeal. Road and engine noise filled the cabin, adding to the overall sense of discomfort and making the car feel more like a cheap commuter than a sporty hatchback. Another major issue with the Plymouth Turismo was its build quality, which was far below the standards expected from a car in this class. As was the case with many cars of the era, rust was a significant problem, especially around the wheel wells and door sills. Many owners reported issues with the car's electrical system, including faulty sensors, dashboard warning lights that would randomly flicker, and problems with the carburetor. There were also complaints about mechanical failures, such as engine stalling and issues with the ignition system. The combination of mechanical problems and rust led to many Turismo owners finding themselves at the repair shop far more often than they would have liked. Reliability issues were compounded by the car's lack of refinement. The Turismo was a victim of Chrysler's cost-cutting measures, which resulted in cheap materials, questionable engineering decisions, and poor attention to detail. Even when new, the car felt like it was built to a price point rather than for long-term durability or driving enjoyment. The lack of performance and reliability didn't help the Turismo's reputation, which quickly sank after it was launched. While it did have a relatively low starting price, the car didn't live up to its marketing claims, and many buyers soon regretted their decision to purchase it. Despite its shortcomings, the Plymouth Turismo did have some redeeming qualities. The styling, for was one of the car's highlights. It had a clean, modern look that was in line with the sporty hatchback trends of the era. The small size made it practical for city driving, and it offered decent fuel economy, making it an affordable commuter car for some. But these positives were overshadowed by the car's many flaws, leaving owners feeling as if they had been duped by the car's outward appearance.